Okay, guys. Well, my name is Heather, and for those of you who were not with us in session number 1 and 2, this is session number 3, and our focus today is going to be talking about clinical documentation. So officially, this is our EMR or clinical documentation session, and we are going to be talking about some things today that are not quite clinical in terms of documentation on a patient as well, but we're just going to go over all the options and tips and tricks that there are regarding documentation within the software. So hopefully that's what you have all intended on seeing today. The session, we are recording this today as well, and it will be loaded on our website. So for those of you that are not familiar with where to go on our website, maybe we'll start with that part first. So hopefully you can see my mouse moving around on the screen. At the very top of your screen when you're first logged in, if you have the desktop version, by the way, that I'm referencing today, if you go to the Help menu and then go to the About section, that's always the fastest way to get your contact information there. So there is an email address for support. So if you ever do have any questions along the way, if you need assistance, help me download this form, whatever, you can always shoot out an email to the support team to contact you. And then there's also a learning center. It's a link called our university site, and it's basically a whole bunch of little training videos on things within the system and how to do certain things within the system. So when you go to that link called the Learning Center, this is it up on my screen right now, and it will take you to a bunch of videos. What we're going to do today is pretty much go over most of these little videos here available in the documentation section. Okay, so back to Practice Perfect. I have open right now the scheduler, and although we're not really getting into the whole scheduler and how to schedule appointments today per se, that was all part of session number 2, I do still like to use the scheduler as it's very visual, and I like to use it almost as a to-do list for some documentation options. So if we focus on Wednesday, January the 22nd on my screen, and we look kind of down the list for that therapist, it's pretty much a list of all the appointments that therapist had scheduled for the day, and the attendance symbol on the right-hand side is representing whether that appointment was an arrived, a completed, canceled, no-show type of situation. So Practice Perfect is going to be pretty concerned if at some point we don't have documentation on people that are arriving or completing their appointments. It's going to be a little bit more flexible and a little bit more forgiving if you decide you're not going to do notes on people canceling, no-showing, or rebooking. It would be okay with that. But your clinic may have an operational procedure that you do a note on every single appointment regardless of the status, and if they cancel or no-show or rebook, you actually say that in the note and that's all it says, and then you sign it, and that's completely fine too. But for today's purposes, our system is going to be focusing on people who are arriving and completing and thinking that it needs to do a note or some kind of document on them. So on my appointments here, I have a whole bunch of fake patients that I've set up in certain ways, and I'm focusing right now on my test private patient, my patient that has no insurance information. And we're going to talk about a few options before we get into the whole SOAP note and eval and reval. So the option I usually like to start with is the contact log, and I'm going to highlight that for you. It's an icon that appears on your function bar, and it looks like a little phone, for those of you that are not familiar with that, and that's called a contact log. So you do not need the scheduler to get started with. You can find that contact log icon throughout the system. You can be on a list of patients, you can be in a patient profile. Just keep looking to that function bar, and if you see that little phone, that's the contact log for the patient. So a contact log initially was designed to store conversations, almost like a to-do list, a reminder list of things specific to this patient that you may or may not want directly in a clinical note. So an example might be collection letters. We've tried to contact this person 3 times to collect their balance. We're sending them a 3rd reminder tomorrow, type of thing, whatever. And then we're talking to a doctor, and this is what we have to say, and we have to be reminded. So contact logs, in theory, can be anything that you need them to be. clinical, non-clinical, you define that, the category you define under housekeeping, under the task menu, and then contact log categories. You decide what are going to be in those categories. When you're in a patient and you click the green plus sign to create a new one, or I'm going to go to an existing one and edit, you have the choice then to define what category you want to list as that contact log. So in my scenario, I'm going to pretend I'm a clinician and I am recording this as a physician call. And my physician call has a date, and I have a whole bunch of notes. I've called the doctor. I've tried to talk about return to work, blah, blah, blah. Whatever my situation is my comment. From there, I can define this or assign this to a responsible party, a username and a password, or I can leave it kind of wide open for anybody to look at. I can also assign something called a follow-up date. It's like a to-do date, a date you want to be reminded to complete this. And you can also initiate a reminder that pops up on your screen. Now, this sounds like a great feature. It's a love-hate situation. If you're going to have 50 of these things that you're assigning due on the 1st of February, you're going to get 50 individual pop-ups on your screen if you assign them all as an update reminder. So just a heads up on that. If you choose not to physically have the reminder pop up on your screen, that's okay. We can still run a report for all of these things. So I'm going to say okay to that contact log. The report that you can run comes from the reporting section. The category is task and clinical, and it's the first report on the list called the contact log follow-up report. And typically you filter what you're looking for. So you might say something like, I'm looking for all the stuff I have to do by February the 1st. I don't want all these categories, but I want just my physician calls. And I don't want maybe everybody else's stuff, but I just want the stuff that's been assigned to me, the user. And then a preview will filter all the things out and give me a list of just the things that meet that criteria. So this is a list of all my patients with contact logs where I said there's a follow-up date by the 1st of February for a physician call. And then my log kind of tells me what to do. From here, I usually complete the things on my list. I go back to the patients. I find the log that initiated this. I edit the log, and then I probably provide some kind of update to the log. February, whatever, talk to the doctor, everything's great. And I either start the process again by assigning it to someone else, choosing another date to follow up, or I'm recording this as a completed log, meaning no need to remind me anymore, no need to show up on my reports anymore, but a completed log will kind of stay here on the screen forever, and it's marked as a completed transaction. Okay. So why I show these contact logs, and I also should point out that you can actually print all these contact logs as well. If you flag them and then send them to the printer, you can always print those out just like you do any other clinical documentation. But why I show the contact log first is because a lot of things that you do within the system can record itself within that log. And we're going to talk about faxing from the system in a moment, and you can tell the system to automatically make a fax note in the log, record the times that you sent all the faxes out and who they went to. Okay, so let's go back to the scheduler now. So one place to record conversations and little notes, documents, so to speak, on the patient file is called the contact log. Also starting in the scheduler, and again, you don't need to start in the scheduler. I just like to do that because it steals a lot of information for my note. If I start on a scheduled appointment, it kind of knows the date, it knows the therapist, it knows the patient name, it knows the incident that we're scheduled under. It's just faster, I find, but you certainly don't need to do that. But from the scheduler, your clinical documentation options tend to be in the middle of your function bar. So the two blue file folders is what we're going to talk about first. Those are your daily notes. They have lots of different nicknames in the system: daily clinical notes, daily progress notes, daily SOAP notes. Those are kind of all the same things. But that's the blue file folders. It's just the daily note. And then all other types of documents, which we're going to talk about second, is anything else. Evals, reevals, discharges, attachments for your patient, literally anything else that you'd like to include as a document that's not a SOAP note, that's not a daily note. And that icon looks like two pieces of paper officially called activities by document. Okay, so we're going to start with SOAP notes for no other reason than you do 9 times as many SOAP notes that you do evals. So when you're on a patient's chart, the blue file folder on the left, when you hover, it says it's going to show you a list of all the notes you have on this patient. So you would go to the blue file folder when you're trying to look up something in the history, or you're trying to print a whole whack of notes. You're going to flag all your notes you want to print, send them over to the printer. Now, when you're doing something like this, a lawyer has asked you for a whole month's worth of notes or something, and you flag all those notes and you send them to the printer, you can do something called a compacted version, compact all my progress notes. And that would try to squish as much as it could into a sheet of paper. It would ignore things like a body chart and all these fancy things that we're going to get to that you can show on a note. It just tries to condense it. It tries to squish as much as it can onto your note. And we'll look at a full note in just a minute. One of the cool features that you can do in the system is called the Facts feature. It's an add-on subscription in the software, but it's very cool. When you're in SOAP notes or any kind of document in the system, once we get into attachments and evals and reevals, if you flag a whole bunch of things and send them to the printer, within your printer, you'll have a Practice Perfect Facts option. And in the Facts option, you have a cover page. And you can fax it to any of the contacts that have been associated with your patient. So it'll show their name in a drop-down list, and then their fax number will automatically appear, and you type out a little message. And then one of the other cool little things that that does is you can tell it to actually include a comment in your contact log. You can say, I have a category called faxes sent, and I wanted to record that this fax was sent as a completed log in the log for me. So you don't even have to go over there and record that. It kind of does it for you. Okay, so I'm going to cancel it there. So that's the blue file folder. It shows you all the notes in the past, and from there you can activate existing notes. The one on the right has the green plus sign on it, and typically that's always the one you're using. That's the one that will create you a note for this client's appointment, where it steals all the information from the scheduler. So 9 times out of 10, if you're using the scheduler to go to the note, this is the one you're always using, the one with the green plus sign. So what you're looking at right now is the daily SOAP note. It has 4 sections that kind of spell out that acronym SOAP. We have a subjective, objective, assessment, and plan section. Now there are some very interesting settings that you can change and manipulate in the system. Under the settings drop-down, under customize, progress notes, and documentation, where I am at right now is this middle section here. So subjective, objective, assessment, and plan. Those are the official names of my 4 sections running down the left-hand side. You can actually change the names on those if you like. Now remember, any setting change in our system that has a black font to it will affect all users, all usernames and passwords. So it would affect every note, every username and password. If your option has a blue font to it, it only affects the username and password that you're currently logged in as of. So just keep that in mind. But you can rename those 4 sections if you wanted to call this, objective/goals or something. You could always rename that section. One of your other options that you have in here is called a bring forward. And a bring forward means if you type something in this section on your patient's SOAP note, bring it forward the next time you open a note. So in essence, every time you open a SOAP note, what you wrote from yesterday will already be there, and then you can modify it from there. If you choose not to bring forward, totally fine. It just means you start with a completely blank note, and then you have all the other options that you would normally have anyways. So you either bring forward or no bring forward. And the bring forward is a blue font, so it's done per username and password as a choice. Okay, so I have chosen to bring forward. That's why there's words in this section already by the time we get here. So whether words are here or not, we always have the same options from there. So let me just erase this whole section here for us. You always have the option to free type. So just place your cursor, start typing words. Your second option is a manual copy and paste feature, and that is done section by section. So because my cursor right now is under the subjective section, this is showing me all the past subjective sections on this patient. And then in theory, if there was more than one, I could pick and choose what I would like to copy from. Copy from yesterday, copy the one I see from 3 days ago. Move down to objective, copy that from 3 days ago and a month ago. Move down to assessment, copy that from yesterday. So you can always manually kind of pick and choose. Okay. The fourth option is something on the right-hand side of your screen, and that's called quick phrasing. So quick phrasing are little phrases or sentences or paragraphs that you custom design, and you basically store them in memory forever so that the system helps you do the typing. So to create phrases that would appear on the right, you first have to type something on your screen. It doesn't matter if it's a single word, a whole paragraph, doesn't matter how big or small. And you have to highlight those words. And then once you highlight, you'll notice the green plus sign will activate on the right. And that means you're adding those words you've highlighted to the right. And then typically you type in a description for those words and you place them in an existing category, or you make up a brand new category for those things to belong to. And if your username and password has authority to do so, you can usually define whether these categories or whether these phrases or paragraphs are available to everyone or whether they're just available to this username and password that we're currently using. Okay, the default is that they are shared amongst everyone. Okay, and then you would make sure that your sentence looks correct, maybe fix any spelling issues in here, adjust it accordingly, and then once you're ready, you're going to say OK. And that will store information on the right-hand side. So your categories will have these little plus boxes next to them. You expand the category so that you see all your descriptions. And if you watch to the left-hand side, when I double-click on my description, it just types the words for me into my document, and then I can always manipulate them from there. Okay, so that's called quick phrasing. So the way that this is called your narrative part of your section, and the way that we get those words into the section is usually just bring forward from yesterday automatically. And then you have a copy and paste feature. You can free type, and then you have your quick phrasing available on the right as well. I do have a question coming in on the chat bar. Are those settings available on the web-based version? So the catch is that you cannot change your settings on the web-based version. This settings drop-down technically doesn't exist. But if somebody logs in for you on the desktop version under your username and password and makes some of those setting changes, then yes, they will apply to you on the web-based version. It just depends on what they are. So you do actually have the bring forward available. You just can't change the setting while you're logged into the web version. You do have the quick phrasing, and in the web version you can create them and use them. It's just that in the web version, instead of doing what I just did as a double click on my description to type, you're actually going to just click on that description and then hold it and move it to the left. You kind of scroll it left into your document. Okay, so apart from the narrative part of our note, we also have other things that we can add into the note. I call them add-ons. They're just extra little icons appearing up on your function bar. So we're going to focus on a few of these at the top of the screen here. I'll just highlight a few of them. So using your function bar, one of the options you have is a patient signature. And it looks like a little pen. And the patient signature is if you're treating a bunch of kitties and you want the parent or somebody to sign off on the note along with you, you want to have the actual parent or the patient sign their note, you can actually do that. You give them a little stylus or they use their pen and they sign their note and mark it as a signed note. That signature in a moment will appear on the completed version of the note. Okay. I am on the latest version of the software, by the way. I am on version 5.3.6, and there's a new little icon here appearing for those of you who are maybe not on the new upgrade. So that little lock button, what that's for is sometimes within the system, two separate usernames and passwords want to access the same note on the same patient at the exact same time. And of course, if you do that, usually the first person in wins. And when that person is looking at the note, it locks the note. It means the other person cannot come along and also look and edit at the note at the same time. So sometimes what happens, unfortunately, is that the first user who logs into the note forgets that they left the note up on the screen and they walk away, and it's been half an hour or two, and it's still up on the screen and nobody else can actually get into that note because it says it's locked. This little button will allow you to unlock it. So just be careful because it will log the other person out of the note at the same time. But that little guy is new and available so that you don't have to have the other person actually log in, go to the note, close it. You can actually do that now from the note and unlock it. Okay. The next little icon that I'll point out looks like a little character, little cartoon character there, and that's called the body chart. And the body chart is designed to point and click. So every time you point and click on the body, you're going to get a number that turns green, and you can go backwards and make your number green. When the number is green, that is when you can make your comments below. And then you move on to the next number. I want to talk about injury area number 2 now, and this is what I have to say about injury area number 2. The only way out, you very rarely see a save button in our system, but your only options are delete what you last did, cancel the whole thing. Save is kind of the only way out of this screen. So you do want to hit the save button to get out of that. And you'll notice that all of these add-ons I'm showing you look like a little pop-up that appear on your screen. We don't actually make you scroll up and down in your note to see these things. We kind of pop it up on top of your note. Okay. The next little icon I'll talk about, or icons, are these little goal-looking symbols here, these little icons that look like targets or bullseyes. Those are officially where you record your goals. The goals, in essence, are always recorded the same way in the system. You're always using those two little icons, and they work just like the blue file folder. The one on the left with no green plus sign is the history. It's show me all the notes with all my goals that I've ever written on this patient's chart. The one you're typically using all the time is the one on the right with the little green plus sign on it. And that is the go to my current list of goals. I want to comment or update my current goals. And if you have never entered goals yet on your patient, if you are working in an evaluation and you've never really talked about goals yet, this screen would be blank, and you would hit the green plus sign on the left to activate the goals that you have to choose from. And this is called your goal bank. So the green plus sign activates the goal bank. And the bank of goals comes from housekeeping. You have complete control over the bank and what shows up in the bank and what options you want to put in the bank. The purpose of the bank is so that you don't have to type as much, hopefully. If you pick a goal, it'll type the description for that goal into your document. So although the bank provides the words for you, if you want to choose to edit the goals or modify the description, you certainly can do so. You just simply highlight whatever it is you don't like, type over top of it. You can actually highlight the whole sentence, the whole phrase, and just do a free type if you want as well. Okay. The goal area can keep track of 3 different percentages. It can keep track of the target you're trying to hit for each goal, where you were last time you documented on the patient or saw the patient, and then where you are today. And typically, where you are today is what changes most often. You're usually updating your percentage if that's applicable, and you're commenting on what you worked on today with the goal, barriers to recovery, why these things aren't progressing or why they are progressing faster than you thought. So on the left-hand side, your goal with a description that's maybe a long-term goal, that might stay the same for the next 6 months, but the progress is being recorded on the right-hand side. And there is a setting within the system that you can tell the system I must comment on goals daily within my clinical notes. And if you do turn on that setting, it really will make you comment on your goal every day before you can sign the note. On your goal, you can repeat your sentence from yesterday, but it's the little tick box here that counts as today's comment that would say that that criteria has been met and allow you to sign the note. Below that on the left-hand side is a recording of test results. So I should rephrase that. It's not the actual test that you're attaching to this pop-up. It's a reference to a test that you may or may not have performed today. So green plus line provides you the list, and you control the list in housekeeping, but you pick something from the list and then you enter a score on the right. So you're just basically saying, I provided this test on the patient and they scored a whatever today. So that in the future, if you want to print your note from 5 months ago and then print today's note, you can compare scores. Okay, so okay to get out of that screen. So there's lots of components happening within the note, and at a clinic level, you just have to decide what are the components I need before I can sign my note. In my example, we have the narrative part of our note, we have a patient signature, we have some body chart information, we have the goals that we're working on, and in theory, we can come in and out of this note as much as we need to, and then at some point, we're going to sign the note. So the note itself is always in a status called incomplete, and it stays like that forever. The username and password, or the assigning authority, has to come along and change that status manually and pick something like completed and signed, and then agree that they are signing the note. Once you sign the note, in theory, it's called locked in stone. The official process would be to go back to the green plus sign while you're in this note to do an official addendum or an amendment to this note. So what you signed would, in theory, would always stay as is, and the green plus sign would add an amendment to it. Okay, so I'm going to hit the printer icon so that you can see what the note looks like to the outside world. I'm not going to ask for the compacted version, and I also have asked for almost every single option that's available to me. So I've asked it to include all the information it can. So my preview to the outside world usually looks like this. I have my clinic information at the top left, patient information would follow, subjective, objective, assessment, and plan sections would follow. I've asked it to include services rendered counting units and time. And I should point out that if you do record the time that you spend with your client on each of your service codes, it will add up to the total duration automatically on your note for you. Below that, you might have some goals. You might have a body chart. You might have your test results. And then your signatures would appear on the last page. Okay. And again, from here, if you have subscribed to the fax version, it's nice and easy. You just choose Practice Perfect Fax from your printer options, and then you can fill out your cover page, fax it to one of the contacts on file, and then have it mark itself, if you prefer, as a contact log in the patient's log. Okay, so that is a SOAP note. If we go back to the scheduler where we started earlier today, there's a new little icon appearing on the scheduled appointment that wasn't there before, and that's the blue file folder. So once the blue file folder visually makes it to the appointment, that's your visual. There is a SOAP note, a daily clinical note that's been signed by this therapist on this date for this patient. So in theory, on all of your appointments, if you can identify them as follow-up visits and they're arriving for their appointments or completing their appointments, you're going to want the blue file folder at some point to appear on the appointment. Okay, and while I speak about the blue file folder showing up on the appointment, under housekeeping, you can actually define when the blue file folder should show up. It's a clinical setting called document types. So just quickly in here, I've chosen the system that when I update a daily note, if you follow that to the right, the icon that I want it to show on my appointment is the progress note, the blue file folder. But if I do an assessment or maybe a reeval or evaluation or discharge or something, if we follow that to the right, I want it to show another little icon that looks like two pieces of paper, a document icon instead. But if I'm updating flow sheets and images, I don't want it to show anything. So you can actually define that. Okay. So I'm going to go back to the scheduler on that same appointment now, and I'm going to talk about all the other types of documents. And why we started with a SOAP note is because if we can figure out what we're going to use in a SOAP note to make things a little bit quicker, and some of the icons and the add-ons we're going to use, it's exactly the same for any other document in Practice Perfect now. So all other types of documents available for upload, for attachment, for filling out is called activities by document. So the icon looks like two pieces of paper. And every patient has that little icon that's following them called activities by document. So in activities by document, there's 4 basic ways to add documents. So the first option is right off the function bar. It's a little icon that looks like a scanner, and it's called a quick scan. And a quick scan is looking for a scanner on your network, and it's going to scan a one-page document very quickly back to the patient's chart, and it's going to scan it as an image. So I'll rephrase that. This is not your choice for a multiple-page document. This particular option only scans a one page. So it's meant for something like a copy of the script, a copy of the insurance card, a copy of the driver's license. It's just meant to copy something pretty quick back to the patient's chart. Okay. The next few options that you have for attaching documents are all available usually in this little drop down with a green plus sign called New Document. Okay. And in this area, you have choices for a bunch of different documents or attachments. So we're going to talk about all these in detail. I'm just going to point them out. But you do have pre-built templates that come with the system. They're kind of already pre-designed for you. You have a second option called importing a document, and that just means you have a document already on your computer. You have a scan of physician letters. You have a 50-page scan of x-ray images, and you want to attach that to a patient. That's called importing a document. You have the ability to download some Microsoft Word tests and documents directly from our website. And then you have the opportunity to custom build your own templates. And that appears at the bottom. You can custom build your own documents. So we're going to start at the top. These are These are pre-built templates for you. They come with the system. They're already kind of pre-wired. So off the list, I'll just pick the first one. Although it's called a PTOT eval, you can technically call this document, title this document, whatever you like to. You just highlight that little title field up there and type in whatever you like. You can also file or categorize this document as anything you want off of your list of document types. You could say, this counts as my eval or re-eval today. This counts as my daily note today instead. This counts as my assessment today. So it doesn't have to be used as what it was designed for per se. But you can't really go custom too much on these documents. They kind of are what they are. When you look at the document, it'll always look like this to you. Your choices now are whether you fill it out or leave it blank. So if you decide to fill out a field, you have all the options you have in a SOAP note. You just free type your information like normal. You have your quick phrasing on the right. So remember, if you're on the web version, you just kind of slide it to the left, or you double click. In the desktop version, it'll type for you. And then you have the option to leave it blank. If you just don't like this field, forget it. I don't want to fill it out. Just leave it blank. And then fill something else out and then leave that blank. When you finally get to the printed versions of these, and I should point out you cannot print these on a web-based version. You will not see this next part on a web-based version. But when you get to the printed version on a desktop version, it will not show the empty sections. So it'll just show the information that you did complete. It kind of weeds out all the blank sections. But filling it out as a user, you will always see the blank sections. Okay, but from there, all your options are exactly the same as a SOAP note. You have your patient signature, you have your body chart, you have your goals, you have a double signature if you need to. You're going to sign the note by changing the status. It's exactly the same as a SOAP note. And if we do sign and complete this note, it's locked down, it has our signature on there, and back in the scheduler, it'll throw the 2 pieces of paper icon. So when that little icon shows up on your scheduled appointment, that's your visual that this appointment does officially have a document that's not a SOAP note. It's an eval, a re-eval, a discharge, but it's not a SOAP note. So in theory, you want to have one of those 2 icons on every appointment that's showing up, right? It's either a SOAP note situation or it's an eval, re-eval, discharge situation. Okay. So from there, if we go back into activities by document, our next option on the list is called importing a document. And importing just means you want to grab a document that you've already got on your computer. So you can fill this in. You can say, I'm attaching some images here. It's a 50-page x-ray result from Dr. Smith. And the attaching part is the little file folder. You're browsing your computer to find a document that you can attach. This is where you have to be on a Windows-based computer. Microsoft Office has to be recognized. So it's only able to attach Microsoft Word, Excel, PDF, MP4, MP3 files, but it has to kind of recognize Microsoft Office. Okay, I've attached the document up here. It's a Word document on my patient. So I put a little flag next to it. If I double-click that document, and I say I want to view or edit the document, you'll notice Word is opening up in the background. So I'm actually in Microsoft Word right now. Practice Perfect is running in the background, but this document is actually a Microsoft Office product. It's a Microsoft Word document. So I have all the functionality up here of Microsoft Word. Right? I can do anything that little function bar allows me to do up there. I can tick boxes, I can create forms in Word, I can do all this cool stuff. I don't really have any Practice Perfect functionality though. I don't have my quick phrasing, I don't have my signature, I don't have my little hand to record services. So remember, I'm actually in Microsoft Word, but it allows you to work with Microsoft Word documents, Excel documents, PDF documents. If I modify the document and leave or exit the document, it'll usually ask, do you want to save this? I'm going to say yes. Back in Practice Perfect, you want to do something called a re-import, and that means reattach it. Keep the changes I just made in Word, but reattach this document now to the patient chart. Okay, so this Word document is now the revised one. If I open it up again and say View Edit, it should have my yellow highlight. Okay, so that's called importing a document. My next few documents that you see here are downloaded documents. They're coming from the Help menu, and this part you do have to do on each computer. It gives you the opportunity to download different documents based on the computer you're on. So under the Help menu, and then under Integrated Forms, I'll see if I can open that up on the computer for you. Integrated Forms would look like this on our website, and you can download clinical tests. If you're on the Canadian version, you can download all the Canadian forms, the Ontario forms. Sometimes there's forms particular to your province. You can actually download those to your computer. And when you download them to your computer, they show up in this section. Okay, and then depending on what the form is, if you're in Alberta, we have the AB1, AB2 forms. If you're in Ontario, we do have OCF 18s and 23s, although you can now do that on the system as well. But if you do find the document in here, you just simply have to click on the document, say that you want to view or edit or generate the document, and if it was designed to fill out the patient's name and maybe a birth date or something, it'll try to grab that information from Practice Perfect, but then allow you to fill out the document like normal. Okay. Your next option in the drop-down list is custom. Go custom. Build your own document within the system. So this part takes a little bit of work. This part, everybody has the the privilege to be able to build your own documents within the system. And if you build them, they will appear in this list on every computer for everybody to use automatically. You just have to kind of put the time in to do it. So it comes from housekeeping. Housekeeping has a section called Customized Documents. And it's basically all about fields. That's where all of your time is spent on a custom document. Typically, you have to build each and every field that you want your form to have. So this is a whole list of fields that we have here. So somebody has built an address field, and they said, I want that address field to actually take the client address and plunk it in there. And then I have another field down here. I want to call it motivation, and I want it to be a drop-down field, and I want to provide these two options within that drop-down as a choice for the user. And then you decide how big you want that field to be. Is it highlighted? Is it bolded? Is it italicized? So all these individual fields that you build in your document, the next step is sometimes to place them in a section. You build a section called patient information, and you want these 20 fields to be part of that section. Sometimes you build a table, and you say, I want these 40 fields to build this table. So the document is your last step in building. And when you build that document, you fill it full of all your fields and sections and tables. And when you finally have a document full of all your fields and sections and tables, that's when everybody gets to see it and use it. So if I look on my list for test document as an example, these are a bunch of fields that I designed for my document to have and what the functionality was going to be. I built a table, and I'm allowing people to type in here. I built a text box field. I'm allowing people to type or use their quick phrasing to fill it out. But that way, when you build it in Practice Perfect, it is a Practice Perfect document. Then you have all the same functionality that all the other documents have. You have a signature, you have a body chart, you have the goals, you sign it the same way. It is a Practice Perfect document. You just decided what it was going to look like. Okay? And that's your custom built document. Now, there's a few other types of documents within the system, especially for the Canadian versions. So I'm going to hit the enter button on this patient. In fact, I'm going to switch to another patient on my list, actually, because in Canada, when you have a patient who is connected to an insurance company that is one of the TELUS insurance companies, and that's what I'm simulating at the top here with this patient, a TELUS patient in their billing rules tab will throw these extra little documents down here. These are your consent forms. And if your clinic has set yourself up to integrate with TELUS, meaning you can send the billing information directly through Practice Perfect just by hitting the little send button, instead of having to log into the website, these are the consent forms that are needed to do that. So you just click on the little box and say preview. It takes the patient information, fills in the consent form, and then in theory you print it out and have the patient sign it. So those are kind of one other place that you would find forms. For those of you on the Ontario version, you have another place for your forms, and I'm going to send you to a video to actually see that in great detail. But when you have a motor vehicle patient in Ontario, and the only way the system would know that is because there would have to literally be a payer connected to your patient at the top of the screen that has been set up in a very specific way to say that they are an HCI payer. That's something in Ontario where you send your motor vehicles to. You will have an extra little icon that shows up on the function bar to fill out your OCF 18s and 23s. You can actually transmit, fill out, submit your OCF 18s and 23s just like you can your billing through the function bar. So for those of you, if there is anyone here in Ontario and you want me to send you that video, just let me know. Email me after this session and I certainly will redirect you. And I will show you right now the videos. When you go into our Learning Center, we probably talked about this a little bit earlier today. There's a bunch of different videos. We talked about most of these today under documentation. On the left-hand side for the Canadian version, There is very specific videos here for HCI and how to submit those 18s and 23s for Ontario. And for those of you for TELUS submitters, it will talk a little bit about the consent forms and also how you can set up and submit through TELUS as well for the Canadians. Okay, so I'm going to flip back to Practice Perfect right now and back into the scheduler. So those are typically the options that I like to show a brand new clinic when they're first starting to use the system in terms of what you have available to you for clinical documentation. And then you can decide from there as to which ones work the best for you. Now, someone is asking a question. If you do design your own custom document down here, can you edit those documents once you've saved them? And I might open up the speaker so you can ask specifically. If you mean, can I change the actual template once I've saved the template? The answer would be yes, but it would affect all your other templates. So if I make this document here called test document and everybody's been using it for the past 3 months and I decide I'm going to go in and I'm going to change a field name now from 1, 2, 3 to 4, 5, 6, then all of my previous documents and all my document moving forward would have the change of 4, 5, 6. It would affect everybody. If I got that incorrect, and if what you're asking is that if somebody fills out their form and they have signed the form officially, is it locked in stone? The answer in theory is yes. And it's only the SOAP note, it's only the clinical daily note that has the option with the green plus sign to do an addendum or an amendment to the note. There is a very specific setting, though, in the background. You just have to be careful with this because I forewarn you that you might have an issue with an audit with this particular setting. But there is a setting in the background under your customized notes in progress, notes that you could allow people to sign and unsign the notes. That is a setting that you can enable if you have authority to do that. And that is enabled on my system right now. So if I decide to sign this note completely where it's locked in stone, typically you're not allowed to come back and hear the official process I should teach you is to hit the green plus sign to do an addendum. But you'll notice I can actually take my note and unsign it and make some more changes and then sign it again. So the bad news is that if you do turn on that setting where people can unsign and sign the note later, we don't really keep track of all the signs and unsigns. We only keep track of the last time you signed the note. So in theory, there's nothing stopping you from taking a 6-month-old note, unsigning it, signing it today, and it looks like you haven't signed your note in 6 months. So just a warning on that. But there is a setting. Okay. So everybody, what I will do now is open up the microphones for everybody. Our session is over. That's all I have to show you today. I didn't know if anybody had any specific questions for me. And I should point out, you certainly don't need to be on the spot by asking me a question. You can always email me after the fact if you have any questions or you think about something later. Definitely shoot me an email and we'll make sure that it's all addressed for you. Okay. If not, your session is all over. You are all free to go. And this session should be loaded on the website, I would imagine, within the week.
Heather?
Yes.
Sorry, there's just, I'm just curious, we're kind of behind the times at our clinic. We still have used basically all paper files.
Okay, sure.
Is there, in the university site, is there somewhere that would kind of help with transferring files into the system?
Like how to transfer your paper files, so to speak?
Mm-hmm.
So the best one, well, there is a few of them for sure, like how to scan documents and attach them. That would probably be the best way to go about it. But that's what I would think. So I'm in Practice Perfect still, if you can still see my screen.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to take the whole chart and scan it, and let's say that turns out to be a 50-page scan, you would attach it using the import document feature. You would say, browse my computer, find the 50-page scan that's applicable to this patient. I want to attach it. That would be the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, rather than doing each individual little.
Right, right. Now, if you did do each individual one, then you could categorize them. You could say, these are my assessments, these are my consent forms, these are my whatever. But if you're transitioning, the fastest way is just to copy the whole chart and say, here it is. Here's the whole chart, but it's electronic.
Okay. Right. That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there any other questions I can help you guys with for now? If not, you're all free to go. Thanks for attending, everybody.
Thanks, Heather. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.